Lyn Doole. Lyn is a highly valued member of the ILA and has been since I think the year 2009. And she's also a co-founding member of the ALA. She's worked, I think, for most of her adult years as an educator. She currently works at the Adelaide University in the field of languages. And Lyn has a wealth of knowledge, very deep and wide knowledge in colour and light and certain therapies, in particular, I'd say the photon wave and Samasati, but that's only a few. So she's going to be speaking to us today on the topic of the physiology of light, and that's going to really give us a good foundation for the preceding presentations that come along. So please welcome Lyn. All right. We've got among the audience today some medical doctors, and that's absolutely wonderful because having the medical doctors gives some validation to what it is we do. But medical doctors will not have had the conversation. And the conversation, if you're a light therapist, sound therapist, aromatherapist, Reiki specialist, touch for health or kinesiologist, you've had the conversation. And it goes sort of like this. Hello, what do you do? Oh, I'm a light therapist. Light therapist? Oh, that sounds interesting. Well, what do you do exactly? Well, I shine coloured light on people on and off the body. I've got pen lights, I've got torches, I've got lamps, I've got arrays. Right, and why would you do that? Well, because generally people feel better than they did when I stopped shining the light, and there are no side effects. So how does that work? We're now getting a little bit, angry. How does that work? Well, it has to do with frequency and vibration. Basically, it's energy medicine. Right. At this point, they're backing off because I'm clearly stark raving bonkers. But it is an interesting question, so how does that work? Now, I think that everybody in the room today probably knows exactly how it works, but I thought just to kind of set the stage for the talks that are going to come, it might be nice to kind of remind ourselves of exactly how it works. So I'm going to be doing this from 4 points of view: light on the skin, light through the eyes, lighting, and what I'm calling foreign finds. I'm going to start with light on the skin because in an evolutionary sense, light, the skin, not only is it of course the biggest organ, but it's also where the photosensitive facility began. And in fact, the eyes grew out of photosensitive patches on these little trilobites, this little creature on the side, now extinct. You actually find the fossils of them up in the Flinders Ranges. To put these down, it's not helping me there. And it is claimed with a great deal of evidence that this development of parts of the skin to be photosensitive and to finally develop into eyes was the trigger for the explosion of species in the Precambrian revolution, Precambrian explosion. This is all documented in a book called In the Blink of an Eye, and also we've got an ILA YouTube video about this by Dr. Andrew Parker from the Museum of Natural History in London, who did all the research on this. But so skin preceded eyes as a visual thing. So if skin had this photosensitive capacity earlier, it shouldn't be surprising that you would find chemicals in the skin that are also found in the eye. But in fact, it did surprise Owancia and Wicks of Brown University in 2011 when they discovered rhodopsin in the skin. And they discovered that rhodopsin, in concert with retinal, come together to create melanin, which gives us the tanning response. And why do we have the tanning response? Well, it is a protective one against sun damage to the skin from UV light. Now, UV comes in 3 flavors, A, B, and C. C is absolutely excellent if you're wanting to sterilize surfaces where there are antibiotic-resistant microbes, or if you're trying to purify water, because UVC has the capacity to interfere with the DNA, and therefore microbes do not replicate. Not something you want a lot on yourself, and in fact we're protected mainly by the ozone layer, so we don't have to worry too much about UVC. The UVA, of course, is the one that we do guard against because of the possibility of skin damage. In fact, it could go as much as leading to melanomas. What this melanin in the skin, which has this protective response, does not block out is UVB. And that's a very good thing, because UVB we really, really want, because UVB is the precursor leading to the development and production of vitamin D. And we're all aware of what happens if you don't have enough vitamin D and you have vitamin B deficiency. So the sort of things that we think about are, of course, immediately osteoporosis and osteopenia, and we know that there's lowered immune function if you don't have enough vitamin D. It's also associated with fatigue, with depression, and it has been claimed with slow wound repair, hair loss, muscle pain. All of these things have been alleviated by giving supplements of vitamin D. Actually, we had in the, I think Amanda had this up on our Facebook page about 2 months ago, it has been found that vitamin D supplements are more effective than flu shots, especially among the elderly. Again, this would be because of the strengthening of the immune system with the vitamin D. The thing is with supplements, unless they are formulated in a way that makes it easy for a particular body type to absorb, you can get malabsorption, you can get problems, and you can get other fallout of this. Now, I'm not going to be talking about vitamin D here, but let's take another chemical reaction. Somebody says, you know what, I feel really tired and fatigued, got no energy, and the friend says, oh, you know what, you're probably anemic, you should go and get some iron tablets. So they run off down to the pharmacy or the natural health store or Woolies and pick up some iron supplements. But what you can run into then is the problem of a mineral cascade. Now, every mineral, and these are all trace elements that the body needs, every one it's kind of a yin-yang thing. It comes with a mate. And unless something is formulated with the mate, you're not going to get the absorption. So someone's taking their iron supplements, but they're not properly balanced. So you take the iron, you've got too much, and then your sodium goes up. When the sodium goes up, the magnesium goes down. When the magnesium goes down, the calcium goes down. When the calcium goes down, the potassium goes up. And so this whole cascade of things that happen that are really not good. Now, the thing is, bodies are really clever. You know, if they get the elements they need naturally, they'll sort it out. And it's the same thing, of course, with vitamin D. You can take your supplements, but what's much better is to just get out for 10 to 20 minutes a day into the sunshine. Get the sunshine on the skin. Sunshine on skin is really good. The thing is, in Australia, we don't get enough vitamin D. We slip, slop, slap, and we don't get out in the sun. And according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, 1 in 4 adult Australians shows a mild, moderate or severe vitamin D deficiency, which is not very good. It is, however, better than Saudi Arabia, where in a recent study by someone whose name is on a card down there that I'm not going to get up and put my glasses on and read, it was done, I think it was 2012. They had a look at 488 adults in their survey, and 96% of those people were vitamin D deficient. And this is a modern problem because in the past, in places like Saudi Arabia, in Tunisia, in Algeria, in Morocco, the houses had blank walls on the outside, but inside there was a courtyard. And there you could dispense with a burqa, you got out there, people got their sunshine on the skin, and they were perfectly healthy. So it's one of the perils of modern life. Now, of course, all those courtyards have been turned into home cinemas, and they're not getting the light they need. Over the centuries, though, people have known, they may not have known the mechanisms of how light on the skin was useful for health, but people did know that if you had a sick person, if you were not unwell yourself, the thing to do was to get out and get sunlight on your skin. If we go back, I'm calling it a bit of lost wisdom, to ancient Egypt, of course they worshipped Ra, the sun god, and they had many, many practices of healing to do with the sun. If you go to ancient Greece, they would put out, and we're talking 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, they would put tents out on the beach. The tents would have a covering of a particular coloured cloth. So if somebody came along and they were depressed, you just popped them into the tent with the orange colours. If they were hyperactive, you put them into the green tent or the blue tent. So they knew this stuff that we think we're so clever, we just know it now. They knew it centuries ago. And people got better. In Rome, there were the houses of the well-to-do all had a solarium. And it was a normal thing. You had your bath and then you went into the solarium, or you went to the solarium and then you had your bath. But it was a normal everyday practice. And they had laws which were probably more comprehensive than we have in many parts of the world today, of sunlight laws. It was absolutely forbidden to block anybody's access to sunlight. And if that happened, not only did you get a big fine, that your house could be demolished so that you weren't blocking access there. Here's another thing. I'm going to have to read this off the screen. Florence Nightingale actually came back from the Crimea, nursing the wounded there. She was involved in a teaching hospital for nurses, and she wrote a book called Notes on Nursing. And one of the things she said, "It is the unqualified result of my experience with the sick that second only to their need for fresh air is their need of light. That after a close room, what hurts the most is a dark room. And it's not only light, but direct sunlight that they want. I had rather have the power of carrying my patient about after the sun, according to the aspect of the rooms, if the circumstances permit, than let him linger in a room where the sun is off. People think that the effect is on the spirits only. This is by no means the case. The sun is not only a painter, but a sculptor." I think I neglected to mention in the last slide, of course, about the Aztecs. Aztecs and the Incas would take their sick people up to the top of a pyramid. Pyramids there were flat on top, are flat on top. And you may say, look, 93 million miles from the sun to the earth, 200 meters from the bottom of a pyramid to the top, that's going to make a difference. Yeah, but those of you who have climbed Teotihuacan or any of the pyramids know that the rises are very high and the treads are very narrow. So even if you are able-bodied, getting up a pyramid is a challenge. So if you're taking a sick person up there to lay them out in the sun, we've got to think about intention as being an important part of the healing, of getting them up there. Okay, so going back to Florence Nightingale and her insights on the need for light for healing, that seemed to have been lost for many years, and our hospitals have been dark places, people crammed into wards, the only lighting being fluorescent, no access to natural light. And it's one of the good things about our new Royal Adelaide Hospital, which was opened at the end of last year, that all rooms are single rooms, there are no wards, and every single room has natural light, has a window, has natural light, and most of them are either close to or overlook natural greenery. So somehow this necessity of nature and fresh air and light is coming back in. Of course, when we think about hospitals, we always think about them, of course, in terms of healing, but we also inevitably associate them with pain. And in, again, a fairly recent study in the Journal of Psychosomatic Medicine. Ouch. What is it? Somewhere here I had this particular journal. Look, if anyone really wants to know, come talk to me later, I'll give you the reference. But this was in a hospital in Pittsburgh, in a unit where they did a lot of spinal osteopathic work. And they did this study longitudinally on people who came in for spinal fusions, which is not something I would recommend anyone had, but anyway. The patients coming out of surgery were either put into a room that was brightly lit with natural sunlight, or they were in a dim room. And what they discovered was that there was 45% more light in one room than the other, and that those who were in the brightly lit room recovered more quickly, they had less pain, and they needed less analgesic medicine. In fact, 22% less analgesics needed. Now, of course, any analgesic you give is going to have side effects, and they're expensive. So, yeah, wouldn't it be better to just put people in brightly lit rooms? Okay, going back to people who've known about light and health, going back to the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, there was tuberculosis rampant in Europe, known in England as consumption, galloping consumption. And there was no cure for it. People died. And Dr. Auguste Rollier in Switzerland would take these tubercular children up high into the mountains. You can see that he's got them all there getting light on the skin. He got them skiing, and there are other pictures of him with these desks, and they're all sat there just with their knickers on, doing their lessons and getting light on the skin. So that was Rollier, and he was very successful in treating tuberculosis. Another one that we know of was Dr. Niels Wiberg Finsen, who was one of the first in Denmark, one of the first people to get the Nobel Prize for medicine. He's actually a forebear of Carl Wiberg, who's a great friend of many of us. And what Dr. Finsen did, he was very interested in dermatology. And his first experiments were with red light, which he used on smallpox and cowpox to get rid of the scarring of that. And then again with tuberculosis. In this case, it's tuberculosis of the skin, the lupus vulgaris. That seemed to have no way of curing it, but he used light, and it looks in this picture a little as if he's putting it in the eyes. He's not. You'll notice that they've all got little eye masks on, so the light is going directly onto the skin. He thought at the time that it was the UV that was doing the good stuff. But in fact, later research has shown that his filters filtered out the UV, and it was the blue light that was effective in that case. But all of these things are telling us, get light, sunlight on skin, because it's really effective. Then another question arises. If the eyes grew out of photosensitive patches on the skin, and there are pigments such as rhodopsin and retinal in the skin, would it be possible to see with the skin? Odd question. But at our conference in Florida last year, there was a woman who has been blind since birth. She certainly sees colours, running her hand over, and has great discrimination. You'll say, "Oh, Kathy, is that red?" And she said, "Well, it's sort of in the red range, but to me it's more of a magenta, or it's more of an orange." Now, what else she sees, I don't know. She's going to be at our Oslo conference, and I'm certainly going to be talking to her about this visual acuity. I thought that she may be unusual, but in doing a little bit of research for this talk, I discovered that it's documented throughout the centuries of people being able to see with the skin. And we saw something recently where people had, this sounds horrible, they had attached electrodes and things to the tongue, which is another kind of skin, and were also able to get sight out of that. Another thing that they've done with the skin, of course, is to look at the electrical conductance and properties of the skin. And lo and behold, it seems that there are lines where the electrical conductance is completely different, which just happen to equate with the acupuncture meridians. And there was a whole issue of bioelectromagnetics, number 29, pages 245 to 256, on the electrical properties of acupuncture points and meridians, a systematic review. So this was 168 studies that had been done on the electrical properties of the skin and of the acupuncture points. That was 2008, and we're now 2018, so I think it's reasonable to suggest that if you go to Google Scholar or into the databases, you would be able to find a lot more information on the electrical properties of the skin and of the acupuncture meridians. So let's leave the skin and move on to the eyes. Now the eye is a pretty amazing thing. It has the capacity to deal with the light of a sunny day, which is 100,000 lux, the lux being a unit of light, down to 0.001 lux, which is dark of night. And that's 1 billion to 1 ability of a range there. And how much light comes in, of course, is dependent on the aperture of the iris, which can open and close. Now, light comes into the eye, goes to the back of the eye onto the retina, where each eye has something like 130 million rod cells, and these are very... they're all in the periphery, they don't see colour, they sense movement, they're very sensitive to light, and each eye has about 7 million cone cells, and these are sensitive to colour, not so much to degrees of light, and these are the ones that will give you the sharp image. The information from the rods and cones goes back into the optic centres at the back of the brain by two means. You've got it going straight back from the eye, but you've also got the optic chiasm where the information from each eye goes to the other hemisphere. So you're getting information from both eyes at the same time. And that's all very interesting. And what's going back to the optic centres is for interpretation. We're not actually seeing, seeing anything with the eye. What we are seeing is the interpretation of the brain. And this is why I guess things like Kathy being able to see with her skin and other things, and people being able to see with their tongues, it's because of the interpretation. I've got one here, thanks, Sam. I'll pinch Manisha's water. So the visible thing is obviously important. But there's something that's even more interesting, and that is that as well as the rods and the cones, there are some other cells, only 1 to 3%, in the retina, and they are called ganglion cells. There's various kinds of them. And they have a direct link back not to the optic centres, but to the hypothalamus, and it's actually called the retino-hypothalamic tract. Why not? Going to the hypothalamus, we can maybe go on to the next one here. Yeah, this is a non-visual pathway. We can see the hypothalamus there. Now, the hypothalamus it's a kind of a master gland. It's responsible for regulation of body temperature, sleep-wake cycles, hunger, thirst, attachment behaviours, and it's going to send messages to the pituitary, which will release hormones regulating all these things. What's also let's just go on a bit, because I think I've got it here. No, let's go back. Stay with this one. What is not marked on this particular picture is structures of the limbic system, which is to do with the emotional responses. You've got the amygdala, and the amygdala is to do with decision-making, quite a bit of aggression, with emotional responses and with memory. And in the memory has to do also with another little thing called the hippocampus. Now, the hippocampus will start recording fresh memories, but for them to become permanent memories, you have to go through the amygdala. One of the things that's interesting, and as I try to get into my students who are always terribly stressed about what they're doing, is that if you have stress, you've got adrenaline, you've got cortisols. I must be stressed now, I'm starting to go dizzy. Cortisol's circulating, and that has the effect of producing more connections in the amygdala and pruning the connections in the hippocampus, so you can't learn under that kind of situation. But let's go back. You're looking at something. You've got the image, but you also got the information going into the limbic system, into the hypothalamus. So things that you're looking at, of course, are going to get reactions in the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, but also they're going to bring back memories. So this starts to tell us why, when we work with some of our colour therapy, we're effective, because we are getting at some of those memories that are sparked by the images or by the colours. Now, when I was 7 years old, there was an outbreak of worms in my school. And they gave us all lollies, pink lollies, this big. And 24 hours later, you had 200 students all trying to hit the toilets at the same time. I have never been able to deal with pink. 70 years later, and I'm still having a problem with pink. But this is a small thing, but you know that people do have these associations and they don't know where they come from. But it's the images and the colours coming in doing this to the brain. All right. But yes, there's more. There's the retino-hypothalamic tract. There are these things. Do I have it here? Okay. Newly discovered photoreceptor cells called the Intrinsic Photosensitive Retinal Ganglion Cells. So, as I said, there are various ganglion cells, and they may have to do with localization, with arrangement in space, luminance, and of course going back into the hypothalamus and the amygdala and all these things we've been talking about. But in 2000, it was Ignacio Vivencio and his team discovered that some of these ganglion cells contain a photopigment that they hadn't realized existed before, which they named melanopsin. They didn't know what it did, but they recognized it. 2001, George Brainard, whom many of you will know for his work in the space program with NASA in what's happening to bodies in space. Brainard and Kevin Taffet found that melanin, that light actually stops the production of melanin. So, okay, you're going to interrupt your sleep light cycles. Sleep-wake cycles there. 2002, Bergson found that some of these ganglion cells seem to operate, obviously not the ones with melanopsin, but some of them seem to work completely autonomously, nothing to do with light. And then also in 2002, Samuel Hatter's group discovered that these ganglion cells again go through to the hypothalamus, but to a particular part of the hypothalamus, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And this is the biological clock. This is what controls our circadian rhythms. And this is what happens with the circadian rhythms. Depending on the amount of light you're getting, you're going to be having rhythms of sleep, of autonomic nervous system, cognitive performance, hormones, memory, all kinds of things. At different times of day, they're really working well or not working well. And here we go, another thing of the eyes and the circadian rhythm. But what we'll notice on this one is that we've now got the pineal gland in there. The pineal gland is a very interesting one. I say this about all the glands, they're all interesting. Bodies are interesting. The pineal gland has, over the centuries, been thought of as something spiritual, and it is entirely possible that if we are just downloading programs from the universe, we're doing it via the pineal. There's a story which may have been maybe apocryphal that René Descartes, the philosopher who was also a doctor, when he was dissecting cadavers to find out how things worked, he discovered the pineal and said, the seat of the soul. Now, this wasn't very popular with the church, and this is the church that had said Galileo had to be locked up for his life because he dared to say that the sun moved around the earth. That he said that the earth moved around the sun, which, of course, this was contrary to the church's teaching. So the only way that Descartes was allowed to go on with his dissection processes was if he said, the church takes everything from the head up and I'll take everything from the head down. I haven't actually sourced what Descartes actually wrote. This could be completely apocryphal. But it is said that this is the division between the mind-body that has dominated Western medicine for so long. Funny thing like this. Anyway, the pineal, shaped like a pine cone, you could call it pineal, some people do. It's absolutely pivotal in getting light into the brain and working on all these circadian rhythms and clocks and things like that. It produces probably about 34 chemicals, and there's only 2 of them we know anything much about. One of them is melatonin, which is involved in the sleep-wake cycles. The other one is dimethyltryptamine, DMT, which has been known as the spirit molecule. DMT, not only is it produced by the pineal, but you get it in magic mushrooms, toad skins, various hallucinogenic things that the Ayahuascan shamans take. And the Timothy Leary generation would have been dropping DMT as, well, lysergic acid. Certainly you get visions when you've got DMT. DMT is produced in the body naturally only under times of great stress. One of them is in vaginal birth. As the baby comes through the birth canal, it is bathed in DMT. And interestingly enough, when people have near-death experiences, as Manisha was talking about, they almost always talk about coming through a tunnel towards the light. Where are they? These welcoming hands, probably throwback to the birth thing. People who have out-of-body experiences and can witness themselves lying there on an operating table and hearing everything that's being said around them, they also would have high levels of DMT. Monks sitting on top of mountains meditating, taking one breath every 3 minutes and not eating or drinking, of course their body's under great stress. They do get the visions and they're full of DMT. The thing about the pineal is that because it is so essential in getting light into our brains and there into our body, it needs to be clear. And what we're seeing more and more is, in the modern world, is calcified pineals. In fact, in autopsies done on MS deceased, the pineals are completely calcified. It could be that if we autopsied everybody who died of natural causes, we'd find they all had calcified pineals. But it is an increasing problem, and it's happening because we're being exposed to halides such as bromine, chlorine and fluoride. So if you want to keep your pineal gland free from calcification, I do suggest that you drink filtered water and give up your fluoride toothpaste. So calcifying pineal glands is one of the big problems of modern life. And another problem of modern life is light at night. We evolved, of course, to be active in the sunlight and not active at night, and not to have a lot of light. Now we have pictures of our cities from space because of so much light. We sit up in bed with our tablets and read far into the night with our blue screens. The streets are illuminated. It throws our physiology out a great deal, and not only us, it's doing terrible things to the ecology. You have nocturnal animals that hunt at night, that operate at night. Now, as night becomes day, these animals are finding their habitats and their ability to survive threatened. We've got wetland species such as frogs that do their mating by the calls in the dark. There's no dark. They're not making the mating calls. They're not mating. We're getting fewer frogs. We have the hatchlings of turtles that are programmed to move towards the light on the horizon. But of course, if there's glare coming from a football stadium, they're going to go the wrong way. We lose millions of hatchlings. We've got birds whose migration signals are being compromised. They're leaving at the wrong time. They're mating at the wrong time. It's a disaster. Now, as I said, we evolved in natural sunlight. Now, if you look at the spectrum of the natural sunlight, you will see that all the colours that we use are there. It's a full spectrum. And if we evolved with all these colours and frequencies, presumably it's because that's what our bodies need. The incandescent, thank you, Clipsal. The incandescent light bulb that Thomas Edison invented indeed had this same spectrum. So it was a fairly healthy light for us to use at night. But the Australian government, along with other governments in their wisdom, said, oh, goodness me, this incandescent lamp produces 40% heat. That's no good. That's a waste of energy. So they banned the incandescent bulb, and they introduced energy-saving bulbs and LEDs and all kinds of things. And the spectrum is completely different. So if you look here at the natural sunlight and sunset, you see the incandescent, how it mimics it completely. But then you look at the LED and you see that there's a very strong spike in the blue, which is not good. If you look over at the fluorescence, you'll see that there are some wavelengths that are missing completely and others that are overrepresented. So this is go back. What happened? No. So we've got malillumination, which is as bad as malnutrition, and it's leading to things like obesity, depression, diabetes. So the cost saving that the governments thought they were making by banning the incandescent bulb will be more than compensated for by the increased medical bills of people who are getting sick. Another thing with the lighting is this blue light hazard. What you've got is UV and blue light coming in, hitting the macular fovea, the most sensitive part of the retina. The UV actually gets filtered out by the aqueous humor, the jelly in the eyeball, but the blue is not filtered out. Now this is with the highest energy, and it's not the blue of the circadian rhythm. It's 430, 440 nanometers, and this will have biomolecular consequences. So again, you're going to have free radicals, you're going to have oxidative redox reactions, which are going to damage the cells of the retina, and this is going to lead to macular degeneration, which is increasing. Also, of course, the cornea, the lens is going to be damaged. So it's not all good being in a not naturally lit world. Okay, let's move on to foreign finds. The first one I want to talk about is Dr. Anatoly Chuprikov. He more than 40 years ago invented lateral light therapy. So different light colours balanced are going to the opposite hemispheres. And he's been able to do a lot with depression, insomnia, neuroses, addictions and phobias. He's out of the Ukraine, and we are actually having him in Oslo to talk. And what I probably should mention about this different light to the eyes is going back to this thing of the light going not only to the visual centres but to the emotional and neurological centres. It shows you how the treatments that people like Dinsha Galiardi and syntonic optometrists, why they work, because they are getting the colours into the brain there. But Chuprikov has been doing it for well over 40 years. He's had fantastic success. And the thing is, he's a medical doctor. He's head of psychiatry at a big hospital in Kiev. And he's done, I don't know how many hundreds of studies that have been validated. So it's absolutely wonderful when we get a medical person who's got credibility, which a lot of us don't have, because we're cranks, obviously.
How does that work?
So having someone like Chuprikov with validated studies is fantastic. Another one coming out of the former Soviet Union is Dr. Tina Carew. Again, Tina's, we have on the ILA YouTube channel, we have Tina talking. Tina's work was on ATP production. Now, every function, every reaction in the body takes energy, and that energy is provided by adenosine triphosphate, ATP. And the ATP is manufactured in the mitochondria of each cell. But nobody knew quite how this happened. Tina worked it out. And it has to do with retrograde mitochondrial signaling with the involvement of cytochrome C oxidase. The thing is, none of this could happen without infrared light. This is absolutely crucial. You have no infrared light, you have no ATP production, you have no energy, you're dead. Yeah, that's it, end of story. But it's not just in this mitochondrial ATP production that IR is so important. Here's another foreign find, and this man, I swear he has got to get the Nobel Prize. He is fantastic. Again, he's been an ILA speaker, and you can see his work on our ILA YouTube channel. what Gerald Pollack, University of Washington in Seattle, and his team discovered that there is a fourth phase of water. You've got liquid, you've got solid, you've got gas, but you've got gel. And the gel has a particular electrical property of clumping together and making a more solidish substance, which excludes what you call bulk water. It only happens if you've got IR, infrared, so you've got to have infrared light. But this EZ, or exclusion zone gel, explains all the things we had to deal with, like potassium pumps and how you did all these things in the cell. We did explain that we did it in a very cumbersome way. This just happens naturally by the electrical potentials. You get stacks of EZ gel. You've got a cell wall. You've got, put a whole lot together, you've got fascia, which connects everything in the body. But every one of these cells is a liquid crystal, and liquid crystals both transmit and receive information. So now you've got an explanation of how you can have instantaneous reactions in the body faster than neurological stimulation, faster than hormones. It's happening through the liquid crystal properties of EZ water, of gel. You need IR for that. Now we move over to the French. And the great thing about the French is that ones I'm going to mention are all medical doctors, so they're all accepted. Their work is accepted. The first one is Professor Pierre Magnat, who was a great friend of Dr. Paul Nogier. Nogier was the one who articulated, if that's the word, auricular acupuncture, where you find what's going on in the ear just by feeling for a pulse in a particular point. Magnat is now 91, I think, and his work is being carried on by Dr. Pascal Vidal. Again, explanation of this on an ILA YouTube video. But what they do, what they call it's the vascular autonomic signal, and they will find anywhere in the body where there is a pulse that's not quite where it should be. They shine light on, and the pulse moves up under where the light is, and whatever the problem was seems to go away. And the last one I want to talk about is an absolutely brilliant man, Dr. Christian Agarapa. He's a neurologist with a particular interest in mental issues. Not only that, he's been head of the French Acupuncture Society for many years. One of the most brilliant things about his work to me is, Chinese medicine has fantastic explanations, but they're really hard for the Western mind to access. If someone says, oh, well, this comes into the gate of life at the meeting of four clouds, or whatever, you think, yeah? What does that mean? What Agarapa has been able to do is to look at heavenly yang energy and earthly yin energy and the trigrams, and explain how light can simultaneously act as a wave and a particle through the trigrams, and it's absolutely brilliant. He's also got the colours to particular things, and when he treats people, he will give one colour for maybe up to 8 minutes, and then the complementary colour for a very short time, maybe 30 seconds to a minute. Then he puts the patient into a dark room for it to kind of cook. One of the things where he is able to see things, I guess, properly from the Chinese perspective, is that he says the body can generate all these energies. Now, we don't think about generating cold. We think of cold as an absence of heat. But Agrippa will say, no, the body is able to generate all these energies, of whether it's humidity or dampness, or humidity is dampness, whether it's dryness or whatever it is. So, as an example of what he would do, let's say that somebody has burnt themselves, they've scalded themselves or burnt themselves in some way. Our immediate thing would be to get some ice on there, to cool it down. Agrippa says, no. It's an absence of cold. The body needs to be stimulated to make more cold. So he will irradiate a burn or a scald immediately with orange light. And this stimulates the body to produce more cold, and then a little bit of indigo. And time after time you find that there's no swelling, there's no pain, there's no scarring, and it all disappears very, very quickly. But he's got treatments for just about anything you can imagine. And he's treated addictions, he's treated phobias, he's treated psoriasis, he's treated, you name it. He can treat it. He's a very brilliant man. Well, I think that's enough from me. Here's a bit of an idea of how things work, and I think it's time for a cuppa.